welcome, and Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Here we are. So we are still at the very early parts of this parsha, where Jacob has had this dream of the angels, and God has appeared to him. And remember how he reacts to this, and it's so beautiful. I love the thought that when he says, "I didn't know how awesome is this place. You know, it's the house of God, and I never realized it." Something to that effect, right? And how it's such a way of maybe looking at the world, that there's so many elements, that the world is the house of God, and we don't realize it, and how we would behave if we did. More and more, the statement, appreciation is the foundation of spirituality. I cannot tell you, it's so, so true. And it's not a pat statement at all. So he is now reacting to this. And of course, Jacob's character is so complex. Of all the three patriarchs, his is the most complex. And he's far from perfect. And yet he's considered a tzaddik. He's still considered worthy of being a patriarch, and all his sons are worthy sons. You know, Abraham had a son who was less than worthy. He had all these children from Keturah, from Hagar. We know about Esau and Jacob, and Esau has serious and severe problems, and here he is, a twin, which I think is the Torah's way of challenging us to be able to see what we can do about this. The tradition, of course, goes off in all kinds of directions about it. But we have Jacob, who's all his sons, and yet, of course, he will, as we're going to see, of course, has incredible pain and sorrow from what happens from the sibling rivalry that goes on. But we also see that he's responsible for these things. And that's something beautiful that the Torah, in its laying out the complexity of his situation, gives us insight as to his faults and his weaknesses. And yet I feel that the beauty of this is to recognize our own faults and our own weaknesses. And, these days I really try to say, not to judge people so harshly. My best sermon is the fact that I'm such an expert on everybody else. But to say to myself, if I'm not perfect, and if I can recognize my own imperfections, how can I judge other people for their imperfections? It's just not fair. So, you do the best you can. These are simply vectors of life, and you work throughout your life to try and manage it. But at least the ideas that came out of reading Torah and reading this material, I feel has tried to give me, I hope, relatively good values. And God, of course, will have to be the judge, and other people will have to be the judge. So let's get into the text. Vayidar Yaakov neder lemor. So Jacob swore an oath, saying, Im yihye Elohim imadi, if God will be with me, ushmarani baderech hazeh, and guard me on this path, asher anochi holech, which I am going, v'natan li lechem le'echol, and gives me bread to eat, uveged lilbosh, and clothing to wear. And I remember my late father, Zichrono Livracha, how he pointed out, why does it not just say, and give me bread? Why does it say bread to eat? Because you can have bread, but you may not be able to eat it. Your health may be such that you can't enjoy the bread. You may have lovely clothing, but if you never can go out, if you're bedridden, you're not going to wear it. So that's why that was a drush that my father of blessed memory, I still remember him for that. So let's take a look. And I don't know how you're reacting right now, but there's a sense in my mind of, here he is bargaining with God, right? And after all, God has just told him, right? He's told him he's going to be with him. So maybe the way we need to look at it is saying, God, if you in fact, do what you said you're going to do, right? And of course, there's going to be a follow-up on that. But even so, it's still, is there a lack of trust here? Is that what he's showing? But again, I think the Torah wants to reach us, and it wants to say, you don't have to be this incredible holy person to be someone who is in fact a tzaddik. And Jacob is our best example of that. So,
Well,
yeah,
didn't Jacob's shenanigans with the birthright and the blessing also kind of show a lack of trust?
of course, of course. And on the other hand, I love the way the tradition tries to help justify Jacob and give him a vigorous defense. All right. And again, is our tradition trying to help us look at the positive side of even people who we might question. And look, Jacob is not a wicked person, right? He doesn't kill people. He doesn't, he's somewhat of a cheat. I'm sorry to say it. And in some ways, he's a little bit of a thief.
But he
But
matured.
yes, he does. And that's the point, Lauren. That is the point. That life is this journey to please God, wisdom, and maturity. Yes. And that's the purpose of life. Again, I've said this before. If we were born perfect, there'd be no reason to be alive. There'd be no reason to be alive. But what the reason is to discover our lack of maturity, our imperfections, to discover what they are, and to spend our life trying to improve them. And life now not only becomes purposeful, but it also, I think you discover joy, you discover the value of service, all kinds of marvelous things about life, which, it's no longer something that's uh, just enjoyment, just looking for fun, but it has deep meaning. So let's keep going on this Rashi. Im yishmorli havtachot halalu. So Rashi's going in the direction that I was suggesting, which is simply affirming, saying, if he will guard for me havtachot halalu, these promises that he's made, shehivtichani, that he promised me, liyot imadi, to be with me, kamosha amarli, just as he said, V'hinei anochi imach. This is, of course, what God said to him. Behold, I am with you. But listen, knowing that God is with you in the sense of God being your judge, God being your protector, God providing a bazillion blessings. So let me just share with you. So I got up in the middle of the night, as is my custom, a lot of stuff. I don't know if it's 50%, I don't know if it's 30% of stuff has been put away in this home that we moved to. And I'm looking for my slippers in the dark, and I'm looking for my robe in the dark. I'm looking for the hand washing cup that I use to get my day started and to purify my hands, etc. I don't know where any of these things are. And little by little, it wasn't simple, but I found every single one of those objects. And I'm so grateful because they could be anywhere in this house. And I feel God helped me. And there's such gratitude in my heart for God helping me find every single one of those three things. And I was able to sit down with my Sidur and my book of Psalms and my Tikkun and do something that I try to do every night. And of course, Lisa has mentioned that consistency is such a wonderful experience, that it gives you something that you can count on in life. So again, I feel God is in every one of those things. So going on with the Rashi. Ushmarani, and guard me. Kamosha Amarli, just say Rashi is showing how Jacob is paralleling the promises that God made him. Kamosha Amarli, just as he said to me, Ushmarticha b'chol asher telach, I shall guard you in all wherever you go, in every place you go. And again, we are Jacob's offspring. We're Jacob's descendants. And to have that sense that these promises God made to Jacob aren't only to Jacob, but they're also to his descendants. And to know that these promises apply to us too. V'natan lechem lechol, and gave me bread to eat. And again, parallel. Kamosha Amar, just as he said, Hilo ezovcha, or azovcha, I will not abandon you. V'hamavakesh lechem, and one who has to go in search of bread, hu karui ne'ezav, he is called basically someone who's abandoned. If you've got to go seek your bread in that way. Shne'emar, as it says in this amazing psalm, by the way, V'lo ra'iti tzadik ne'ezav. It's the last verse. It's part of the Birkat HaMazon, right? And I have never seen a righteous man ne'ezav, abandoned. But what it means, okay, and it goes on to say, Bezaro and his seed, drum roll, Mevakesh lachem, seeking bread. And that's Psalm 30, it looks like 37, Psalm 37. And so that is the idea. And again, I know there are people who won't say that verse because they feel they've seen righteous people who have suffered, etc. But I have to understand this in a literary kind of way and in the basic level in which God sustains people so much. So I think it's, if I were to try to interpret this verse in Psalms, is not saying necessarily that this stuff never happens. If I want to take it literally, I can say, well, I've never seen it, okay? But I think it's also really talking to us, that we need to trust that God will see us through all the difficulties and adversity that we have. And in fact, there's a verse that I actually want to drush on, not right this minute, but it's a verse that says, Rabot Ra'ot Sadik, much adversity, many troubles befall a righteous person. Let me think if I can think of the Hebrew as it finishes. Okay, Umikulam Yatzilenu Hashem, and from all of them, God rescues him. So I find that verse very, very helpful in facing many kinds of adversity, to sense that whether I understand it or whether I don't understand it, to have trust that God is going to see me through. I see a lot of these things as actually blessings. And there has been many pitfalls in this process of attaining a new home here on the peninsula. So let's take another. If any of you want to comment, I'd be happy to hear what you have to say. Okay, I'll keep going. So this is what he's going to. Oh no, he's continuing. Jacob is going on, right? And this is again because God made him all these promises. V'shavti v'shalom el beit avi, and I return in peace. And let's understand it whole, right? To the house of my father. And now he says what he's going to do. V'haya Hashem li lelohim. Hashem will be for me an Elohim. And I've only more recently understood what we mean by that. So let me do the Rashi, and I hope to explain that. It's not going to have surprises. So, Vishavti, and I return. Kamoshe Amarli, just as he said to me, Vahashivoticha el ha'adama, I shall cause you to return to the ground, to the land. V'shalom, what do we mean? Shalom min ha'chet. Oh, wow. Means whole from having sinned. In other words, not having sinned or having paid for my sins. Could mean that. Shelo elman midarchei Lavan, that I should not learn from the ways of Laban. V'haya Hashem li lelohim, and God will be for me an Elohim. In other words, Hashem, the Lord, will be my God. Let's see. Shiyachu Shmo Alai, that his name should be upon me, mitchila va'ad sof, from beginning to end. Okay. So, Shelo Yimtza Pasul Bizar'i. Look at this, that he should not find any defect in my seed, in my offspring, in my descendants. Kamosha Amar, just as he said, Asher Dibarti Lach, as I have spoken to you. Ve'havtacha zo, and this promise, Hivtiach la'Avraham, he made to Abraham, what he said, right? Asher Dibarti Lach. Shne'emar, as it states, Liot Lacha Lelohim, to be for you an Elohim, Ulazaracha Acharecha, and to your seed after you. And that's back in chapter 17. Zaracha Meyuchas Shelo. Okay, so Zaracha Meyuchas means that your offspring should have, Meyuchas means you know who your ancestors are, right? To have yichus means to have ancestry, so that you know who they are. Shelo yimtza bo pasul shum pasul, that there should be no defect, meaning an illegitimate offspring, any illegitimate offspring. That's what it's referring to. And now I have to try and remember. Oh yes. So to say, Rashi is, in a sense, is making this another condition. In other words, he's saying, V'haya Hashem lilohim, and if God is my God, and he's going with that sentence as meaning it's another condition that Jacob is making. So I was taking it as a answer, as saying, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to make God, Hashem, my God. And by that, I understand that when you make Hashem your God, right, you are willing to perform mitzvot, you're willing to accept God's judgments against you, you're willing to accept the adversity that comes your way and still love God. In other words, to be able to really express unconditional love as best as we can. Let's go on a little bit. One more sentence. V'ha'evan hazot, and this stone, asher samti matzeva, which I have set up as a matzeva, as a pillar, yeh beit Elohim, it should be a house of God. V'chol asher titen li, and everything that you give to me, li aser asrenu lach, I will give 1/10 to you. So tithing, ooh, tough, right? It's such a discipline, but to the extent that humanity still worships money, still worships the golden calf, look at tithing. It is a way of getting away from such, putting such value on money and these physical kinds of things. So, I try my best. I've been trying better. It's still a very, very challenging discipline for me. I can only say that I'm doing better than I was, but these are all these ways in which you can look at yourself and say, I got to do better. I'm not coming up to speed. So let's take a look here. Okay, Evan Hazot, and this pillar, the stone rather, Kach Mefurash, Vav Zo Shel Vahaevan. So this is the way this Vav of Vahaevan, this Vav, right, of Vahaevan and the stone, Im Ta'aseh Li Et Ele. So he's saying now that this Va sort of shifts the conversation to saying that this is what Jacob is going to do in return for all these promises God has made and keeping those promises. So, et ela va'af ani esezot. He says, and I too will do this. V'ha'even hazot asher samti matzeva v'gomer. So, and this stone which I have made is as a pillar, right? As a pillar. Ketargumo, and so we are looking at the Aramaic new, ahi falach Allah. So here we go. So which I made as a matzeva. Onkelos translates di ehe falach alei Allah, or is that an A? It's hard to see. Allah min kodam Hashem, which I served from before God, right? V'chein asa b'shuvo. So what's he saying is that if God, in fact, fulfills these promises as he goes into exile, and that, of course, is a foreshadowing of the life of the Jewish people in exile, right? He says, he's answering it as a future, right? So I am going to when I return from Padan Aram, I will offer up and worship at this place. Kashe'amar lo kum ale. So when God said to him, kum ale Beit El, has to be, when he says to him, go, arise to Beit El, and that's later on in chapter 35. Ma ne'amar sham, what does it say there? vaYetzei Yaakov matzeva. It says Jacob set up a pillar. So we understand that pillar as and so vayasech alei nesech. So he set this up, or he had set this up, and he makes a nesech, and nesachim are libations, right? In other words, pouring oil and wine on it as a dedicated act. And I'm going to stop right here. And I'm so grateful that we were able, okay, that's doing other things. All right. I will try and find a place to mark this for, please God, the next time we come to this next year. And we are finished Rishon, so we got through quite a bit. All right. Very good. Going to stop the share. And any last comments before I
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't ask for wife and children.
Well, he did get that.
Well, I'm asking, you know.
And I also think it's interesting that it says the vav meant the end of the conditions, but they all had vavs.
Right.
Well, maybe it's the fact that of what he's saying, what he's going to do, right? He talks about him setting up the stone.
I understand. My point is that what does the vav have to do with that? Because all of them began with vav.
Right.
Yeah.
And.
But those are all God's things. And maybe in a sense, that's what Rashi is saying, that, this and is not the same as the other ands. In other words, all the other ands were adding to what God had to do. This and isn't adding to what God has to do.
The new and improved and, okay.
This is not the and you are looking for.
not your grandfather's and.
There we go. I love it. Okay, I'm going to stop the share for the moment. Stop the recording, excuse me.